As we all know, China's army has always had a hard rule of not mistreating prisoners. So what about the West, which has always pursued humanitarianism? They are humanitarian, but they only treat themselves humanly. It's their old tradition to take advantage of the double standards. Unexpectedly, the incident that happened in the Korean War to resist U.S. aggression caused heavy losses to the U.S. military. Who thought they were taking advantage? Today, let's tell the story of the U.S. military's rollover in detail. In 1950, less than a year after the founding of the People's Republic of China, everything was waiting to be done. The Western countries led by the United States tried to strangle the new life in the cradle by setting up a United Nations command to invade the Korean peninsula with the excuse of aiding South Korea. They even crossed the 38th parallel and reached the Yalu River, attacking people within China and posing a threat to their lives and properties. Faced with the shameful acts of the United States, Chairman Mao resolutely made the great decision to aid Korea, to resist U.S. aggression. Therefore, under the leadership of General Peng, batches of the volunteer army valiantly marched across the Yalu River. At that time, the strength of China's army was vastly different from that of the United States. The U.S. military had advanced weapons and sufficient logistics supplies. Even the canned luncheon meat that the U.S. military was tired of was a delicacy that the volunteer army couldn't imagine. Everyone knew that it would be difficult to defeat the U.S. military. MacArthur, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. military, naturally held a high profile and did not pay attention to the volunteer army. He spoke wildly that the Chinese dared not fight against the Americans. So General Peng grasped the mentality of belittling the enemy. Of the United Nations command, marched stealthily, successfully led the enemy into an ambush, and won the first battle to resist U.S. aggression in Korea. MacArthur remained arrogant, only feeling that he had been negligent for a moment. He said that he would end the war and take up Korea before Christmas. However, reality gave them a hard blow. By the end of the first campaign to resist U.S. aggression in Korea on November 5, more than 15,000 enemies of the United Nations command had been killed, wounded, and captured by China's army. At this time, China's army was gaining momentum, and the United Nations command could only change its arrogance. Most people within our army believed that it was a good opportunity, and we should take advantage of the situation to move south and annihilate more enemy forces. However, General Peng made an unexpected decision, ordering the 335th Regiment to retreat from the front line and letting the 39th Army, which had captured the most enemies, release 100 prisoners. The soldiers all exploded upon hearing that the prisoners were to be released. How could they let go of the enemies that they had worked so hard and narrowly escaped death to catch? They still expected to exchange prisoners for food and equipment from the U.S. imperialists. So, the commander of the 39th Army held a small meeting for the soldiers to tell everyone about General Peng's real intentions. It turned out that the release of prisoners was just a bait, and the real big fish was yet to come. General Peng's battle plan was to take the initiative to fall back, lure the enemy deeper, and use ambush in the rear to attack the United Nations command. As for how to lead the United Nations command into the ambush circle, General Peng came up with an extremely ingenious way to lure the enemy in. First, the volunteer army looked like they couldn't hold up any longer and was about to retreat. They dropped some worn-out guns on the retreat road, pretending to be defeated by the enemy. Who came to intercept them and making the enemy think that they have been routed? To increase credibility, it is necessary to find several prisoners to confuse the enemy before releasing these prisoners. China's army told them. The China's army are not the main force and have neither ammunition nor food. If the army don't go back, they will starve to death. The U.S. military blew up the hydroelectric power station next to the Yalu River, leaving China's army no electricity in northeast China. So they couldn't engage in war anymore. China's army, which has always treated prisoners well, personally bandaged their wounds and sent them to the area agreed with the enemy, ensuring the safety of every prisoner and making a show of truly retreating home. The prisoners were all bluffed and even somewhat moved by the preferential treatment of China's army. They reported what they knew to their commander. As soon as they went back, the words "without ammunition or food, no way to sustain, pack up and return home, the bomb is too powerful," all got out. MacArthur was stunned, and the enemy was taken in as expected. However, for China and the West, the meaning of taking the initiative to release prisoners is different. Perhaps in our view, the initiative to release prisoners indicates a kind of royal demeanor and expresses our magnanimity. Once Bai Qi of the Qin dynasty massacred prisoners wantonly, resulting in a great loss of popular support. In contrast, Yang Hu, a famous general of the Western Jin dynasty, took the initiative to release prisoners of war from the kingdom of Eastern Wu, which made the Wu people sincerely convinced. But in the Western perspective, taking the initiative to release prisoners of war means the exact opposite. In the West, prisoners of war are often treated as slaves and can be sold to the market as a commodity. So, in Westerners' mind, taking the initiative to return prisoners of war to knuckle under and please them is somewhat similar to the tribute paid to the imperial court by ancient barbarians. Similarly, in MacArthur's eyes, it was undoubtedly a sign that China's army was throwing in the towel and begging for his mercy. Coupled with the description of these returned prisoners, they were convinced that the China's volunteer army had run out of ammunition and food. MacArthur even estimated that China's army would have no more than 60,000 to 70,000 troops, which posed no threat at all. MacArthur arrogantly thought that it was time for a showdown. So he ordered all his troops to attack without even leaving a reserve. As General Peng expected, the United Nations command plunged into the ambush of China's army and was caught off guard. 6 troops on the Western Front were in the Siachanshan River area, and the 9th Corps on the Eastern Front was in the Chosin Reservoir area. They launched a counterattack against the United Nations command at the same time. In this unexpected way, the United Nations command was stunned at a stroke. Then the volunteer army launched a fierce pursuit, taking the United Nations command all the way to the south of the 38th parallel. Throughout the campaign, the so-called United Nations command was chased by China's army like a stray dog. They had no idea that China's army would ambush. Finally, 36,000 people of the United Nations command were annihilated, including 24,000 Americans. In addition, China's army also captured a large number of weapons and equipment, as well as chariots left by the enemy when they fled, which were in rows as far as the eye could see. The deputy commander of the 38th Army exclaimed, "I have never seen such a spectacle in so many years of war. General Peng is really a superb military commander." An unusual large number of American soldiers surrendered voluntarily this time. Nearly 1,000 soldiers from the 38th Army alone surrendered voluntarily. And they even took out preferential treatment cards. Which was really ironic. It can only be said that the US military was really good at adapting to circumstances. Not surprisingly. Just because China's army was too benevolent and never mistreated prisoners. They also treated injured prisoners and did not seize their personal property. China's army even met their spiritual needs, gathering prisoners of war from 14 countries to hold a sports meeting. Interestingly, the US military almost won the championship. But the Korean army, which was good at escaping, beat the black prisoners and won the first place in the long-distance race. This episode ends here. If you like my video, please follow me, give me your likes, and forward it. Every encouragement from you will be the driving force for me to make better videos.